So this is my career path. And then I was the mid-90s. It was a scary time for research with a lot of tri-council cutbacks. And so I moved from in the lab to joining the Innovations Foundation, which was the tech transfer company of the University of Toronto, where I was not doing science, but I was managing science. Okay, and I was working to actively match researchers with industry. And we can get into a delightful debate around the corporatization of knowledge, but that's what I did. And then left to join the Canadian Arthritis Network, and then worked at CIHR, Canadian Institutes of Health Research, for a couple of years, and then landed up at York. And I couldn't wait to get back to university. And at York, my job was to manage the grants and contracts for the university. And that's what Nancy does at SFU. We've had our national meeting. The Canadian Association of University Research Administrators has been meeting for the last 3 days. And so we've got a nice interchange between Congress and Cora. And so I ended up at York and managed the tech transfer portfolio, but recognized an opportunity, as I said, in 2005, to write a grant application for York and UVic to do that kind of tech transfer work, but for social science humanities. And we didn't have the words knowledge mobilization. When did Shert come up with KM?
2001.
Oh, see, hadn't read your stuff by then. So apparently the words are out there, but we thought we were being original. and we called the project Research Impact. So Research Impact is what we now call Canada's National Knowledge Mobilization Network. It's entertainingly running out of money, but we'll talk about that because it's just been York and UVic, and Saskatchewan and Memorial came on last year, where we wrote a grant application with all of these folks in it, and we didn't get the money, but that's okay because we started talking, and we started asking the question, what would a National Knowledge Mobilization Network look like? And the fact that we're running out of money, this is an interesting thing I've learned at Cora, because a number of universities have popped up and said, we'd really like to be part of it. And they did that last year when we had money, and I said, I don't have money for you. You know, we just had the grant. But now we're running out of money. It's actually easier to talk to other universities, because none of us have money. So it's a little easier to ask that question, what would an unfunded national network of universities and their local decision-maker partners look like? So now that I'm almost grown up, what have we learned? Is that this is about being a boundary spanner.
Yeah.
So this is about working, recognizing opportunities, be open to the possibilities. Whatever your graduate career is looking like, you can connect research out. Your research might connect to an archive. Your research might connect to a gallery. It might connect to policymakers. You know, it might connect to school kids. Might connect through the media to parents. So there's lots of ways that you can be a boundary spanner. And as you saw, there's no career path. None of us sort of say, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And in fact, did you ever do the aptitude tests in public school?
Yeah, I had 94 possibilities.
Really?
Yeah.
You know what I should have been?
What?
A chicken sexer.
That actually...
Who knew? Or a librarian. That's what it came out. That was grade 8. Yeah, you're blushing more than I am.
I'm just thinking of the last dinner that we had.
So, be open to these possibilities, because knowledge broker or manager of knowledge mobilization doesn't appear in anyone's aptitude tests. You know, so
Yet.
hopefully they've taken off chicken sexer. So there is no training for this. Okay.
Yeah.
But be open to the possibilities. That's the message about how to look at a career, whether you're a faculty member, whether you're a graduate student, whether you're working in an NGO or a labor group or the private sector. Be open to possibilities of being a boundary spanner. Now, a couple of other stories. People I know well at York, Michael Johnny is the manager of knowledge mobilization. He, along with Laura Milne, who is the KM manager at UVic, are sitting in the booth at the book fair. So if you get a chance to go to the book fair, drop by the Research Impact booth. He has a master's in Native and Canadian Studies from Trent, and he worked as an adult and Native literacy practitioner. So he worked in the community. He worked at an adult literacy center called the Alpha Plus Center. So he's got an academic career, but he came from the community. And when I was looking, I wrote his job description, well, not his, it was a job description for Manager of Knowledge Mobilization in 2005. It's embarrassing to read it now. I mean, it was the first time any of us had thought about this type of role, so we didn't have the words. But he's a wonderful example of someone who never thought he'd be here, because there's no training for this. But he recognized the I recognized a real talent of someone who was used to being a communicator, because he worked in literacy. And he was used to making complex ideas understood, and he was used to connecting his knowledge into a practice. And we take that and put him into the university now, and he's brought all of that knowledge and expertise with him. So we're thinking about communicators, we're thinking about connectors, we're thinking about people who turn knowledge or research into action or into practice. And that's Michael's story.
There's a direct family relationship between community university research and knowledge mobilization. So how the term came about was, so remember in that career path? Okay, so I'll just put it into a context. Action research has been one of the things that I've been most interested in most of my life. It started originally in church, right, which was about projects either in the community or in places outside. When I was in biochemistry, what saved me from dropping out was the public interest research groups founded by Ralph Nader in the 60s. The Community University Research Alliance program at SSHRC was a pilot program that was started in 1998, and it was piloted for 2 years, partly because they needed to produce an evaluation of it, should the council continue with it. And it wasn't clear that they were actually going to continue with it, because the board was split between people who thought participatory action research, community university partnerships, community-based research, whatever name you want to put on the sets of methodologies, was a good thing or a bad thing. In fact, some of the board members said, it's fine for partnerships, it's bad for science. To which my response was, well, I'd like you to use scientific methodology to prove that it's bad for science, which means you have to let the experiment run, you have to get initial results in order to develop your sample size, and then you have to run it longitudinally with a large enough sample to show what the result is. They didn't like that response. So after the evaluation was in fact done by an outside consultant, and a series of site visits by the president of the organization and one of the vice presidents, who came back and said, we're satisfied with the level of research, but there's a whole series of things that are being produced that we don't know what to call. And the discussion that we had within the council was, what are those positive externalities, right? The increased student interest in certain disciplines and subdisciplines, the access to artifacts and knowledge that wasn't accessible before, the linking together of community leaders with academics, with business leaders, with politicians in a way that wouldn't happen before. There was a whole I think there was something like 94 or 96 examples that were brought up out of this evaluation. That cluster of positive externalities became the basis for knowledge mobilization. Like, that was part of the discussion. And so participatory action research and knowledge mobilization are directly related to one another. What the challenge is, remember that what, so what, now what diagram? And there was incentives and infrastructure on either side. One of the challenges that comes up is that if you propose to do a set of activities and you don't have the proper infrastructure or the right incentives for people, it collapses on itself. And so when you say that it's really hard to get a participatory action research board through an ethics review, well, of course it is, because the ethics review are set up for an entirely different purpose than what you're trying to do. And so the infrastructure that's supporting that particular methodology actually isn't properly adjusted. What's emerging, part of what's emerging out of talking about knowledge mobilization and doing it is that organizations, institutions, policies are starting to adjust themselves so that more value is being realized. And in that list of value determinations, the tech transfer stuff is all about product, right? It's about product that you get into a commercial fiscal marketplace. Well, there's lots of things that can't be measured in a commercial fiscal marketplace, but nonetheless have value, right? How do you put a cost on the building of trust between partners within a community? It's very difficult, but we know that trust is a reducer of transaction costs for almost everything.